setting up the MUPOS device, and we've got it set up. We're just logging into the website, and this is going to capture infrasound, gyro, all kinds of sensitive stuff, even
we move it
movement
back?
and everything. So yeah, so we're going to move it over behind. Yeah, Carl's house, Mount Wilson Ranch. Wow, there it is. That's the data.
Believe it or not, there's a lot of petroglyphs in this area that seem to indicate that that's the case.
The MUPOS device active and getting ready to live feed to all of the members of the MUPOS Club.
The Howard Hughes Company and how they had the first psychotronic directed energy system contracts, and all of the evidence says and rumors are that he was up here and he's the one that put in the runway.
Wow.
Definitely off the same piece.
There is a ranch in Nevada near Area 51 that was secretly researched by Bob Bigelow's original Skinwalker Ranch team of psychic spies. For decades, while simultaneously researching Skinwalker Ranch, the NIDS team was searching for the lost entrance into a giant cave system of ancient alien artifacts. An abandoned alien mining operation leading to a 500-foot underground pyramid hiding a UFO nicknamed the Mount Wilson Manta Ray. For thousands of years, indigenous people have known and protected its secrets. For decades, top-secret government teams, even before Ronald Reagan's Star Wars program, were scouring the ranch attempting to recover the metamaterials, biological material, and ancient unknown artifacts, and were stopped by an explosion of paranormal activity. Animal mutilations, alien abductions, poltergeist activity, moving orbs of light and shadow figures, strange glitches in time, and the ghost of a Native American shaman appearing alongside with 3 extraterrestrial beings who protect the land. Now, new leaked whistleblower evidence has confirmed the truth behind these local legends. New ancient artifacts are being discovered, and mysterious energy is transmitting from the meadow, and an undiscovered tunnel entrance has been found. Independent researchers, scientists, archaeologists, and Native American historians have joined me, Carl Crusher, to uncover the truth. We are on a mission to find the lost entrance into the underground and uncover the real mystery of Mount Wilson Ranch. Now there's the question is do we have any activity over the day? Well, look at that dip right when we were out in the flake zone. I don't know if that's normal or not, but the fact that this is all just in general, the microwave level is so high. Check the gamma over there, if you can. I forget you're left-handed.
All right.
It throws me
How
off. I'm
weird,
like,
huh?
my brain's like, how are you doing that over there with the left hand? Look at that gamma spike. That was 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning. And then a little couple right here. What are you looking for? You're looking for a picture 1977 when you went to Close Encounters of the Third Kind, the movie?
Yep.
Oh my God.
I've had it in my mind, and I would love to find that.
We were just standing in the saloon reminiscing about how crazy it is that Jacques Vallée and Eric Davis are literally the 2 scientists that movie was based off of, Close Encounters of the Third Kind. They even picked actors that looked exactly like them. So I think all of that happened up here, definitely.
I mean, what is the draw? How does this all wind up? All of those guys, and here we are.
I know. And the projectors too. I mean, here they are. Like, these are even the real. Imagine Steven Spielberg takes this old equipment and he turns it into his Hollywood production. It becomes like a giant, DJ concert with lasers and light and sound. But really, they were just using old 1970s TV equipment. What are you looking for? You're looking for a picture 1977 when you went to Close Encounters of the Third Kind, the movie?
Yep.
Oh my God.
I've had it in my mind, and I would love to find that.
We were just standing in the saloon reminiscing about how crazy it is that Jacques Vallée and Eric Davis are literally the two scientists that movie was based off of, Close Encounters of the Third Kind. They even picked actors that looked exactly like them. So I think all of that happened up here, definitely.
I mean, what is the draw? How does this all wind up? All of those guys, and here we are.
I know.
What's cool in this town? We could make Travis Taylor will be wetting his pants off of this.
What's in there?
Look. We got rockets.
Fire a rocket at it.
Oh yeah, we got old rockets in
Let's
here.
fire a rocket at it.
Learjet.
The Learjet. Should we fire a bottle rocket up in the meadows, see if it hits anything in the sky? We haven't done that yet, technically. We have definitely projected lots of lasers in the sky, though, and that's going to be coming out in June. Knick-knack woke up like super dizzy, and I had a whole phenomena last night, so I woke up at like 3 in the morning, and my chest and heart was like vibrating, like this pulsing, but it would vibrate, it'd go for like 10 seconds, and then drop. And then there'd be no sensation, and then drop. So I've just been over here in the saloon. I got up this morning. We're doing a live interview up here with Paul Sinclair. And so we were testing the Wi-Fi for that. And then we just went live on TikTok. I've been going live on TikTok a few times, doing a tour of the saloon and everything. But we got to go up to Jeff's house now and check the data again on the modular sensor, because Knick-knack woke up really dizzy, and I woke up at 3 in the morning, and had a weird vibration thing, and rolled over and looked at my phone, was looking around the room, and had a weird feeling. But wow, it is dumping snow outside. Oh my gosh. Well, this changes things. I was honestly brainstorming about going and spending time at Area 51 and doing some sky watching, but I do not think that's going to be what we're doing up here. But when I was doing the live stream, one of the things that I did was I pulled the artifacts out that Jeff has up here, the spears, the blades, the ancient indigenous artifacts. And I noticed something in this box that never really stuck out to me before. But when we're talking about the metamaterial, there's all this U.S. congressional hearing, whistleblower hearing, all this stuff going on. And behind the scenes, the metamaterial, the recovered stuff that was supposedly came from a UFO crash site, was this bismuth aluminum zinc alloy. And look at what Jeff had in the box right alongside these ancient Native American spears. These are the obsidian blades. We've shown these in other videos before. These are the ones that when you hold them up to the light, they're translucent and have this like zebra striping or marbling that goes through it. That's really beautiful. But this one was found by Jeff, dug out of the dirt just right down by Craw Creek here. And in that box, along with all of these other blades and artifacts, is, look at this. Bismuth. This is 100% actual bismuth. And then I noticed in there as well, I need to ask Jeff where he got all of this from, is this rock, and this is heavy. And I don't know what this is made out of, but it feels heavy and it makes my fingers feel weird. It's so heavy, it makes my fingers like tingle to me, where I almost like don't want to touch it, like maybe there's radioactivity coming off of it. And I want to check it for that. But this looks like it definitely is some kind of an alloy of bismuth and something else all fused together. And this might be a chunk of the metamaterial that they are claiming came from a UFO site. So when they say that they've got stuff from another extraterrestrial source, they never even say extraterrestrial. This is the metamaterial that they're researching all the way up at Congress, is like this slag that supposedly fell off of the bottom or dripped off the bottom of a UFO or of some kind of a craft. Either that or they got it out of the ground from some ancient site, which is all the evidence that we have here. Where is Jeff? Yo, are you still here?
He might have went up to check on Knick Knack. I gotta find Jeff. We gotta talk to him about this. Okay, there it is. Look at that. Looks weird, right? This is a Geiger counter. So it goes this way. Giving off a little bit of a signature, it feels like. But nothing in the danger level. That might be why it feels weird to me. Thank you, Patreon Inner Circle, Candace, for getting this for me. It's definitely chirping when I get close to it. There you are. Where did you get this rock, sir?
Let's see which one we're talking about.
The weird alien metamaterial rock. You know which one I'm talking about.
Oh,
Where the hell did you get this thing?
I'm not telling you.
You son of a bitch, dude. That was been sitting in the box with the arrow,
Yeah.
with the blades the whole time.
There's two of them. There's actually another one.
I saw the other one, but this is the one that made my fingers tingle when I picked it up.
Cool.
My end of my fingers went numb as soon as I touched it. Like I felt it go into my wrist, man.
You
Like
know, so in truth, this stuff here is amazing, is it not? Look at that. Like,
where did you get
is
it?
that somewhere up?
Here?
Yep. Yep.
Dude, this is weirder than the metamaterial I
Oh,
saw.
there's a lot more of it. So this is in a natural occurring spot. But I mean, look at it.
It's bismuth.
Yep.
It's like a bismuth alloy, though.
Well, it's a There's another one there's like multiple versions.
Is
of
it?
it.
Do you
I
have
believe.
any of this that looks like it's like frog skin, like
You know, we
bubbly?
have those pieces. The stuff that we collected last year. That looked like the slag.
Yeah,
You know, the-
yeah. The stuff down in the creek that
that's
we
in,
got.
did you ever check room 2? Nick said she put it in the shadow box for you.
There was. I just saw pottery in that one, so maybe it ended
Possibly,
up
maybe room 1
in a
then.
different room. I will check.
I'm sorry I didn't call them by their correct words, rooms, but
No, it's okay.
I know them by the old school. Yes, bismuth. Thank you.
This is some kind of bismuth blend, but that's exactly what Gary Nolan, Hal Putoff,
Well, theirs has aluminum.
Travis
on it,
Taylor,
right?
aluminum. This is like heavy. This one's heavy. It makes my fingers feel weird when I mess with it. Does it yours? It chirped a
I
little
never-
bit on radiation, but nothing unusual.
Yeah, I never felt anything unique from it. I believe on the black
Maybe
light,
there's
this
some
one-
esoteric weirdness going on with it somehow.
Hey, again, we're into the gold mining a little bit, right?
Yes.
Well, there's people that when they get around gold,
They swear they feel it.
they do feel it. They absolutely do. You can actually see that so people are connected to. Definitely connected.
There was a whole thing where it was rumored that there were certain people born that could see it, and like you could see glowing lights on the mountainside, and then they would go dig and find gold minerals, and a lot of those people got abducted into the oil and mineral industries.
I think I've personally saw it before my very eyes. People that truly, get the fever.
Like a dowsing rod almost for it, right? When Kyle was up here with me and we went to the lower meadow, the creek was flowing through. That was the whole season when the ranch revealed itself to us.
We should get down there today, actually.
We could find more. Yeah, I mean, it is snowing outside right now pretty hard, but we were down in the Craw Creek and Kyle kept finding this stuff and pulling it up. And now, fast forward, the descriptions and the pictures and everything that we've seen of the metamaterial that's gone all the way up to the U.S. congressional hearings looks exactly like we pulled out of the creek. And not only that, it looks exactly like the stuff that I saw last time I was up at Skinwalker Ranch headquarters, right by the microscope and everything. They had these sample containers, these jars full of
soil samples that were marked and labeled for scientific study, and there was these cases full of potential metamaterials. It looked exactly like what Kyle was pulling out of Craw Creek down in the lower meadow. And not only that, we were sitting up there looking at the data from the MUPOS device, and all of this with Howard Hughes keeps coming up. And it dawns on me that, and Jeff and all of us, that Danny Sheehan just was talking about how Howard Hughes was the guy that was involved in the Watergate scandal with Richard Nixon, that when they were trying to develop the technology to have a submarine off the coast of Cuba, that they were going to project a hologram of Jesus Christ, and they were going to fake the second coming of Jesus using Project Bluebeam stuff like Richard Greer talks about, Stephen Greer. And like they were going to project a hologram of Jesus, and Jacques Vallée actually admitted that and talked about that on the Jeremy Mishlove podcast, right?
Perhaps something that we are creating ourselves, perhaps a series of images that we are projecting. I think Carl Jung came very close to expressing that idea in one of his books. Or could it be manipulated purposely by people who have the technology to simulate UFO sightings? And people say, well, of course not. Who would do a thing like that? Well, I would remind you that during the Watergate investigation, it was discovered that there was a plan originated in the White House to surface a submarine off the coast of Cuba and paint the second coming of Christ over the island of Cuba using holograms. Which is well within our technology today. The idea was that since there is a large Catholic population in Cuba, they would be so upset by this vision that this would saturate the communication channels, the telephone system in Cuba, long enough for an invasion to take place.
How interesting. I'd never heard of that.
Well, I think that's a classic in psychological warfare, but that kind of manipulation is well understood. And I have personally investigated several apparently genuine UFO cases where there was in fact a manipulation. My conclusion, the conclusion of scientists working with me, was that there was in fact a manipulation taking place, and that it was not a hoax on the part of the witnesses, but a hoax on the part of somebody much better organized than
So there are possibly all of these levels going on simultaneously.
Today, with the current technology, that would be possible.
And the three-person partnership was Batista, Santos Trafficante, and this guy, Paul Helliwell, for the CIA, are the ones that handled all the heroin coming in through Havana.
From Laos?
From Laos.
Wow.
That's right. Through Vang Pao. Yeah. And so the bottom line is I came into the office and we ended up, participating in getting McCord to blow the whistle on them. He wrote the letter to Judge Sirica, explaining to him who the burglars were and what they were doing, because he thought that they were actually coming in to try to protect. They thought that, the story that he told was that they thought that the Democratic Party was coddling people that were illegally opposing the Vietnam War, which they thought was undermining national security. That's what James McCord was talking about. But the bottom line is, it turns out, we found out through our interview of Trafficante directly that the reason they'd gone into the Watergate Hotel was because Larry O'Brien, who had just been made the new head of the Democratic National Committee in the Watergate Hotel in Washington for 25 years, previously was the chief lobbyist in Washington for Howard Hughes. And Howard Hughes is the guy that Richard Nixon contacted to set up the assassination team to kill Castro and Che Guevara. And the bottom line is that's the group that killed the president. And that's what the Watergate burglary was all about, is Nixon was terrified that they were going to find out that, because Larry O'Brien had worked for Howard Hughes, that Larry O'Brien may have found out that Nixon is the one who created the assassination team that ended up killing the president. And that if that ever got out, that nobody would believe that he wasn't behind killing the president, which he wasn't. but he was behind trying to kill Castro. Nixon knew he was going to win the nomination because Nelson Rockefeller was out of the competition, and Nixon was going to be the nominee. And they were certain they were going to win because, there was this kid, Kennedy, that was going to be the nominee for the Democrats. So they were all convinced that he was going to win. What Richard Nixon did is he was the head of the 5412 Committee, which is the subcommittee of the National Security Council that does covert operations under Section 5412 of the National Security Act of 1947 that authorizes the CIA to engage in activities from time to time at the request of the president to protect national security. And so Nixon chaired the 5412 Committee of the National Security Council. So he knew that Howard Hughes was a secret consultant to the National Security Council. He was running special operations. He, for example, had designed and created the Glomar Explorer, which was the special ship that was able to pick up submarines off the bottom of the ocean if a Russian machine. Right. He also did the C-5A cargo plane out of the Summa Corporation, and he was also doing other stuff for the National Security Council, 5412 Committee.
We're talking about Howard Hughes, the guy
that
Leonardo DiCaprio plays an aviator, right?
This is Howard Hughes, and he's living in Las Vegas, at the one of the major mob hotels, and he's living in the penthouse suites up there, right?
Right.
And so the bottom line is Richard Nixon contacts him as soon as Richard Nixon knew that Nelson Rockefeller had withdrawn and he was going to be the nominee, and he contacted Howard Hughes and on the secret phone for the 5412 Committee, talked with him by phone and asked him to set up an assassination team to kill Fidel Castro, Raul Castro, and 5 of the comandantes that they wanted assassinated. And he said, but you got to keep it completely away from the White House, so that, but if you could get that done, that I would deeply appreciate that when I become president, right?
But if Howard Hughes, why would Howard Hughes set up an assassination team?
Well, when you know the nature of what some of the things were that Howard Hughes was doing with the 5412 Committee, it was the deepest, darkest, most secret stuff that they were doing, and he was part of it.
They had the first psychotronic directed energy system contracts, and all of the evidence says and rumors are that he was up here and he's the one that put in the runway.
Since he never left the Desert Inn, he needed a team of executive assistants and advisors to oversee his business dealings. This team was led by a man named Frank Gay, who was curiously known as Bill. Gay was a Mormon that Hughes had hired right out of UCLA. Hughes preferred working with Mormons because he knew they didn't drink, smoke, or gamble. He thought this made them more likely to avoid being tempted by the vices of Vegas and handle his business with greater discretion and integrity. Hughes was so committed to using Mormons that they wound up composing the entirety of Gay's team.
According to the weather, we got maybe 2 hours before full blizzard, so we got to move fast.
Okay. Andy, Paul, and the team at Mount Wilson Ranch have one chance to try to blast their way into 2 abandoned mine entrances that might connect to an underground tunnel system, leading to what is rumored to be a buried UFO.
Mine 2 gave us a lot of pause because it looked like it was intentionally filled.
Okay.
And our question became, why would anyone take the time to fill a hole? If it was a non-productive mine,
you would just leave it. And who filled it in? Who and why? Did Bigelow do it, or was it done 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago? Right.
Now all of this, like I said, is at the mines themselves, but the same land mass actually flows down to something called a lower meadow. And then we took it to the magnetometer, and this is what our magnetometer showed us.
Oh, look at that.
This square area here, this is the lower meadow.
That's clearly artificial. That looks like a phased array.
Sure does.
Looks like a phased array antenna system built under the ground. You see where I'm going with this, Eric? Mm-hmm. We've heard rumors that certain low frequencies in that range could be used to not only detect UAPs, but possibly even take them down. But I never knew them to bury them. They were always on the surface.
The group quickly became known around town as the Mormon Mafia. By the mid-1960s, Las Vegas was heavily influenced by people who were either members of or associated with various American mafias. While Mormon businessmen had been the ones to encourage the growth of the relatively shady gambling business, they were simultaneously concerned about what it was doing to the city's image. They eventually realized that the solution was to arrange for the mob-owned casinos to be purchased by someone with a more legitimate image, someone like Howard Hughes. Worried that if his involvement was generally known, he would get gouged on the purchase prices, Hughes' casino buying spree was ultimately enabled by E. Perry Thomas, who had posed as the buyer in Hughes' stead. His involvement remained a secret, and by the time that secret got out, the billionaire aviator already owned over a dozen properties in the town.
So do you know the original story of how it was kind of procured initially?
The original story was that it was sent anonymously by someone claiming to be an Army officer.
Long story short, this Army officer was going through his grandfather's archives when he found this rare sample.
And then written in the diary was that it was a piece from Roswell.
True or not, these thin layers of bismuth magnesium are very hard to reproduce. Howe claims that they even have the properties to micro-size waveguides for terahertz frequencies.
Stranger Things shows a lot of fucked up experiments being done to kids to bring about their psychic abilities. The problem is, experimentation like that actually happened, and it wasn't a conspiracy theory. In earlier videos, I talked about Dr. Andrija Puharich, the military doctor who had his dick in just about every New Age and metaphysical group from the 50s onwards. You can't swing a dead cat without hitting something Puharich was influencing in some way. One of those things was experimentation, really insidious experimentation that was being done on children. Hypnosis, psychic driving, and things to make them supposedly develop their psychic ability, but which was really fucking them up. This all started at Puharich's lab, which he called the Round Table Foundation, which was established at a military facility that was said to have been given to him by the Navy. It's a 5,000 square foot fortified storage facility in Maine. Then, somehow or another, he just moved into a 50-room mansion on the coast that was bought for him, supposedly, by the heiress of the Astor fortune, John Jacob Astor's daughter. And this is where he started testing on kids. I have an article here called When a Shadowy Maine Estate Was an Epicenter of Psychics and Psychedelics by Andy O'Brien. It's from one of the local papers in Maine, and it goes through some of the history of this facility. Puharich's more arcane research, meanwhile, involved gathering sensitives from around the world to stay at Glen Cove while volunteering for experiments on the nature of their abilities. His staff built a set of copper-lined booths known as Faraday cages to block out radio waves and other electromagnetic interference to better isolate the potential psychic inside. What there was a real mind control psychic training program being done to kids at a facility just down the road, and nobody talks about it. This all revolves around the shady as hell Dr. Henry Puharich. I'm just going to lowball it for you. Puharich was involved with creating every meme, everything we think of as the New Age movement, from drug use, hallucinogenic mushrooms, LSD, DMT, channeled material, raw material, star children, star seeds, indigo children, Nikola Tesla's popularity. He had a hand in popularizing all of these over the years, and let me show you why that's so nefarious. You might remember him from my first video where I presented the Studies and Intelligence document from the CIA that describes him giving a presentation to the Pentagon in 1952 that started up all of their interest in extrasensory perception and parapsychology. But that wasn't entirely accurate. I've got his resume here. He was put into the Army Specialized Training Program in 1942, put through medical school, and specifically tasked with doing hallucinogenic research, hallucinogenic plants and compounds, on mind control and extrasensory perception. So once this military private graduated from medical school, he just went through society with a rocket up his ass. He got introduced to all the blue blood, all the old money that ran society. The Astors, the DuPonts, the Bordens, the Rockefellers. And he became best buddies somehow with the Vice President of the United States, who would visit him on his farm. And this farm was a 50-room mansion with acreage on the coast that was bought for him by the heiress of the Astor fortune. And that mansion was his human testing facility, where he brought in people that were psychic, tested telepathy, hallucinogenic drugs, and various technologies to replicate them. What technology he was working on is shown by his patents, that are various forms of hearing aid that use facial nerves instead of actual electronic devices to conduct voices and sound into the brain directly. The early versions of these hearing aids were implanted in your tooth and conducted through the facial nerves.
But there are those who believe that this same technology could also be used by DARPA as a new form of mind control. Like their counterparts at the CIA, DARPA-funded researchers have spent decades investigating how the human mind can be altered. In 1965, DARPA launched Project Pandora, which studied the possibility of using microwave radiation to control human behavior. The project reportedly ended in 1969, but DARPA's investigation of how machines can affect and possibly control the brain continues to this day.
There are explicit programs of DARPA to read and write to human brains, whether it's through direct implants within the brain or wearing some kind of cap. So these things are being worked on, and we know that.
So what's the next step? Maybe the next step is we can send instructions and information to an actual person from a distance with this kind of technology to let another person control their actions. But that could be something that could be malicious.
Microwaving the embassy. Like an ooey-gooey hot pocket of diplomacy, countries have been using secret microwave technology to cook the hell out of one another's diplomats for decades. The media is now calling these anomalous health incidents, formerly Havana syndrome, but both those terms are bullshit meant to hide the truth. You see, what the media is pretending is a new phenomenon isn't. In fact, I'm going to show you some once classified intelligence documents talking about similar attacks that go back as far as the 1950s. In the early 1960s, an electronics technician at the US Embassy in Moscow found some mysterious radiation that was being beamed directly at the embassy. And this kicked off some secret projects under the CIA, ARPA, and military intelligence to study what was going on. Dr. Christopher Kit Green. If you're familiar with my earlier videos, you might remember Dr. Green as the CIA spook scientist who runs around doing brain scans on people who have had anomalous experiences and UFO encounters, like my friend Chris, who was the guard at Skinwalker Ranch and has lasting health problems because of it, and Thomas Winterton, who had anomalous head trauma from his time at Skinwalker Ranch. Now, Winterton was studied by Dr. Gary Nolan, and Gary Nolan let the cat out of the bag that it was a state actor that actually did that and not a skinwalker. And Dr. Green is all involved with all this. In fact, he's been the ringleader for so much of it for decades. And as I mentioned, Dr. Green is in cahoots with Dr. Gary Nolan studying the UFO phenomena and these mysterious illnesses from the phenomena they're calling interference syndrome, which may as well just be Havana syndrome, which may as well just be the Moscow signal syndrome. It's almost like all this paranormal stuff and skinwalkers and psychic phenomena, ESP and UFOs are being used as a blind to cover up the testing of electromagnetic weaponry and non-lethal weapons. And let's not forget the old rub that they're only non-lethal weapons today. 5 years down the road when you've got brain damage or leukemia, well, that's another story. The tie-in with UFOs goes all the way back to Dr. Andrija Puharich, who, like Jolyon West, was an MK Ultra scientist. You remember that first episode of Skinwalker Ranch where they hit the ranch superintendent with a directed energy weapon? No? Let's watch.
One day I decided to do some digging. And then 3 days after, I noticed that I had a goose egg on the back of my head. By the time I let my wife finally take me to the emergency room, the goose egg had actually spread through my entire head. My scalp separated from my skull. The pain is so excruciating. I've never felt anything like it before in my life. The doctors had no idea what caused it.
Hold up! That's the same brain scan that was used in a Vice article. Look at that. But the Vice article one has some extra drawings on there. And what do they say? Well, look, it's the direction of the radiation, and it's coming from above and behind Thomas Winterton. The subject of the article, Dr. Gary Nolan, states very clearly that it's not a UFO, it's an energy weapon being used by a state actor. This is going to come as a shock to a lot of you, but Skinwalker Ranch probably doesn't have anything to do with aliens and has everything to do with exotic weapon technology. Back in 2008, Bob Bigelow, the former owner of Skinwalker Ranch and Bigelow Aerospace, signed a contract with the Defense Intelligence Agency to report on new technologies. The reports they were preparing were meant to encapsulate everything around advanced aerospace weaponry, including lift, propulsion, etc., including the human effects of being in contact with these new technologies. One of these reports deals with the anomalous acute and subacute field effects on human biological tissues. It was prepared by Dr. Christopher Kit Green, and he goes over how various advanced aerospace technologies can expose humans to exceptionally strong exotic fields that can cause all kinds of crazy shit, heating and burn effects, internal neurological psychiatric injury, etc. And quote, since the potential deployment of advanced weapons technology is subsumed under this topic, of interest are not only the side effects associated with possible lift and propulsion field mechanisms of advanced craft architectures, but also the effects from advanced weapon systems as well. These include, but are not limited to, beam weapons and active denial systems, including high-powered microwaves.
What year was this?
This was 1976, in the fall of 76.
Mm-hmm. So I can report, for what it's worth, I had already met Andrija Puharich and worked with him starting, if I remember correctly, around 1972.
Mm-hmm.
And I was at the time a graduate student in Berkeley, but Puharich, in the world of parapsychologists and in that era, was something of a superstar. He had written a number of books. He had written Beyond Telepathy, exploring the role of the nervous system and psychic functioning. He had written The Sacred Mushroom, one of the early books on psychedelic mushrooms. And he had written Uri. He had discovered Uri Geller. He was already famous for bringing Uri Geller to the United States. Uri Geller, for most of our viewers, a very controversial figure. Every time I mention his name, I get people who respond and say, don't you know about Johnny Carson? He's an absolute fraud. However, I've known Uri Geller for a long time. I just want to lay this out right now. I sponsored his first major public appearance in the United States in 1973. I've introduced him to laboratories in the physics department at the University of California. I've watched him under many circumstances. I've read many scientific papers. So don't talk to me about Johnny Carson. Had to do with ELF, extremely low frequency electromagnetic waves.
Right, based on Tesla's inventions.
Mm-hmm. And if I remember correctly, in that era, the Soviet Union was experimenting with these signals. We use them too, as a matter of fact, to communicate with submarines, because ELF signals could penetrate the ocean. And the Russians were sending ELF signals. They were called woodpecker signals, as I recall, all across the globe. And Andrija was very concerned about this.
Yes, he was. As was Tesla. He was reticent about introducing this to the masses for how it would be used. It could be used for bad as well as good.
I do recall, for example, when Andrija first introduced Uri Geller to the scientific community, skeptics such as Martin Gardner wrote articles pointing out that Andrija had invented a device you would implant in a tooth, and it would serve as a radio, so you could listen to the radio through your tooth. And he had many devices like that. And so Martin Gardner said, this is obviously how Uri Geller is cheating. He's not doing telepathy. He's getting radio signals through his tooth. And Puharich was collaborating with him. So Puharich was a legendary figure for all of these reasons. And To add to the legend, he was friends with many people in high places. I know, for example, Henry Wallace, who was the former vice president of the United States, was a friend of Puharich, came up to the Round Table Foundation. Arthur M. Young, who was my mentor, the inventor of the Bell helicopter, was involved with Andrija Puharich. Gene Roddenberry, the creator of Star Trek, was involved with Puharich and the Nine. And I tend to think that the whole Star Trek series may have been, to some degree, an outgrowth of that experience.
Well, Close Encounters was. And that was a fabulous movie.
The movie Close Encounters?
Yeah, Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
How and what was the connection there?
The Admiral wouldn't name it in the car, in the conversation.
Right. Yeah. So they still have these things, supposedly.
I would guess. I mean, I don't have any information on that.
Have you ever asked anyone that has any inkling of any idea of where they got them or how they got them?
No, but something must have been said to me from Barry. But it was just too long ago, and I can't quite remember what was said, but it just left a seed in my mind. I think at least one of them was part of an archaeological dig. So it's old. At least one of them is old. I don't know if it was the one I worked on, but I remember something to do with an archaeological dig.
Whoa.
So that means it's not just old, it's ancient.
That'd be a great Steven Spielberg movie.
Yeah.
Right?
As all of it would, yeah.
Michael Phillips, the producer of it, he had done some Faraday cage sessions with Andrija.
I see.
And at least Andrija told us he believed that was his mission, was to make that movie. So I got to go to the premiere, which was lovely.
It was also thought by people that Puharich had been involved with the CIA and with the project known as MK Ultra, which was engaged in back in the 1950s before Timothy Leary, experimenting with psychedelic drugs and how they might affect the population.
Yeah, by the time I met him, that was over in terms of being something that he studied on a daily basis. Although down in the basement, there were jars of all these old mushrooms that it was almost like a museum. We never took them, but they were quite interesting looking.
One of the things I noticed, Robert, is that some people imagine that you're still in some way affiliated with the Skinwalker Ranch. And maybe you could just clarify that.
Yeah, no, of course we're not. I sold that to Brandon Fugel in 2017, and I felt it was time. I was concerned about perhaps some of our people or guests on the ranch getting hurt, and that was a big motivation to go ahead and do the transaction with
it. Have you followed what he's been doing?
Once, not really. Once in a while, I've watched the show, just out of curiosity, and I like I do watch the show of Oak Island. Oak Island's a fun show too. In fact, I came across that story when I was probably 15, so it's been around. That story's been around for a long time, and that's an incredible story as well. Completely different, obviously.
I'm sorry, I missed the name. What was it?
Oak Island. Another series, on a really unusual situation of folks digging down and finding about every 9 or 10 feet a strata of wooden timber logs laid in a particular way. And so you go down 9 or 10 stories and you're still digging down, still encountering that. And then the story expands from there. So it's been interesting story as well as the Skinwalker Ranch story.
And I haven't watched many of those videos, but I was, or the History Channel programs on Skinwalker Ranch, but I did happen to tune in one day, and it was like all afternoon long. They ran Skinwalker programs, one after another. So it's obviously been getting a lot of coverage. And one of the things I didn't even know about you is that there was a second ranch, the Wilson Ranch, and for all I know, additional properties as well.
Yeah, well, when I first started to do ET UFO research, I personally interviewed about 235 people, just myself and the experiencer. And most of those interviews were in the area between Caliente, Panaca, and Pioche. And then the Mount Wilson Ranch was in line with that. And the more people I interviewed, the more it was obvious that events were happening up and down that corridor. And the Mount Wilson Ranch was part of that corridor. And so I thought, well, it could be an interesting laboratory. And so that's why I bought it. And then I had some really good interviews with people very close. I didn't pay any attention to something at a real distance, unless it was huge, football stadium size. But if it were, a couple miles, a mile or two away, it didn't matter. That didn't count. I wanted stuff that was literally in your face or chasing you in your car, or you're sitting outside the restaurant and you're seeing this literally football stadium craft drifting across your town, so those are really interesting accounts. And the Skinwalker Ranch had a log house there that was about 1875 vintage, and it had a saloon like you would see at Knott's Berry Farm.
You mean the Wilson Ranch?
I'm sorry, the Wilson Ranch.
Yeah.
The Wilson Ranch. And so the Wilson Ranch had a house about 1875 in terms of its age. And the back bar came around, I think they said Cape Horn, and also at about that same time for this Knott's Berry Farm looking saloon that they had built there. They had built a saloon with other ancillary kinds of, like a little restaurant area and a commercial kitchen and so forth. And the little motel that they had there. And so interesting place, about 145 acres in size.
Then there was the issue you and I spoke of, I guess it might have even been yesterday, of the UFO that flew right into the mountain there.
Yeah. I was talking with these neighbors because there were quite a few other homes outside of the ranch. And so there are a group of them one night are looking up in the sky, and this unidentified flying object, this UFO, is doing figure eights, right? And it keeps doing them and doing them. And so they stand there and they're watching this, and then it deviates dramatically and it shoots off at low altitude right into the mountain itself. But there's no explosion. It's just gone. So the guys get together the next morning, they hike up there to the mountain, and they're looking for debris. They're looking for burnt shrub, anything, trees, whatever. They find nothing, absolutely nothing. And that's similar to the story off the Skinwalker Ranch. There's a highway, and there's a mountain that they had to cut in order to continue the highway. And it's not at that location. It might only be 75, 80 feet in height, something like that, 7 or 8 stories high. And we talked to somebody that said they had seen it, a craft, go right into that mountain and disappear.
Right? Like clear back in the 70s and 60s, they talked about this. Remember all that?
Yeah.
Now we have evidence that Howard Hughes and his contractor that did all the concrete work up here, Dick Williams was his name, that Howard Hughes was up here. We have a runway down the hill. And then if we just clicked for us, the star camps for kids. Tell them about the star camps, or the Mormon camps. They had scout camps up here with Mormon kids.
Yeah, one main teepee, whole bunch of teepees around it. Kids camps, they would come up here and just hang out for the summer.
So they would bring Mormon kids, Cub Scouts and stuff up here to Mount Wilson, and they had big teepees and they would do these campouts and everything. And now we've uncovered that what Howard Hughes was really involved in was a lot of this psychotronic mind control, MK Ultra technology, this projected holograms and things. And some of their colleagues was a guy named Andrija Puharich, and he had a whole star camp for kids. I've got colleagues that have seen photographs of Bob Bigelow in Colorado at a camp for kids that was all, it's literally Stranger Things, where they had little kids that they were tapping in with radio frequencies, with radio signals, and then dosing them with psychedelics like LSD.
Tuning them in.
And then tuning them in and trying to use mind control like RC cars, remote control cars, just like you would pilot a drone. Can you control a person? And not only that, they were trying to channel alternate dimensional entities to talk to aliens and other dimensions of reality by putting these kids in isolation tanks and things. So let me take you over here and show you, and this is all going to start to fit together, about the scout camp for kids that was up here, why there's army barracks down in the meadow, why there might be phased array technology, why there's a runway over here that seems like all this was put in, a lot of it by Howard Hughes, and why he was involved in this secret technology. And then when you come over here, what we found in the summertime up here on the side of the hill, dude, look at this. We've been hiking up and down the mountain all over the place, and Jeff's been up here for 16 years, and then we go down the trail and suddenly the mountain reveals to us a pair of kids' boots and pants.
Right under our feet.
Right under our feet, there's these like child size, almost like youth Boy Scout boots and pants. This is totally like, it makes sense that this is like old Cub Scout uniform stuff, and this is his cowboy boots up here. This is like a teenager came up here for scout camp. And then why are his pants and boots still up here? And if they were doing Stranger Things MK Ultra stuff.
That's big stuff to just not see for years as well.
Yeah,
like
16 years. This is laying on the hillside, or did it just pop out of the air like some time portal thing? Like who did this belong to? Like, see? I know we don't even know. Is there feet inside? Is there bones of toes inside the boots? But what if this belonged to one of the Mormon kids? And now here's where it gets even more interesting. Toward the end of Howard Hughes' life, he was holed up in the Sahara Hotel and Casino in Las Vegas. He rented out basically the whole top floor and refused to leave, and was hiding up there, just like Nikola Tesla at the end of his life, isolated all up in all paranoid and everything. And at the same time, that's when all the Watergate stuff was coming out about his involvement was all in that. And then on top of that, Howard Hughes personally contracted with Mormon security guards from the Mormon church that were already contracted and collaborated through the CIA. So all of Howard Hughes's finances and his private security became controlled by the Mormon church. And so why would he do that if he wasn't already working, doing stuff with the Mormon church and the Cub Scouts and the Boy Scouts of America program, and having these camps for kids in the mountains where they might have been using this type of technology? The question is, why would Bigelow, Hal Puthoff, Tim Ryan, Colm Kelleher, and all these guys come back up here to recheck on all that equipment or whatever was done here, like they're upgrading it or something to make sure it's still here or what was done? And is there laboratory stuff underground? Like when we keep digging underground, if we get into a room or a tunnel system, what if the experiments were bring kids up here for scout camp, put them all under a phased of altered state of consciousness like hypnosis, or drug them all, take them down into the laboratory and try to channel and communicate with aliens through them? And then you talk to Chris Bartell, who worked at Skinwalker Ranch under Bigelow. Most of the time when he was supposed to try to contact aliens, he was really sitting in Homestead 2 doing remote viewing, like Ouija board type stuff. It's literally like, when you think of the people that were here, Hal Puthoff and Andrija Puharich,
Some of these
It's
things
all
were so big that they couldn't move them.
Howard Hughes has a runway here. The stuff that we've already pulled out of the hole that you guys have to see that's still coming out, we can't talk about yet. This is getting weird, dude. Yeah. Whose pants and boots are those? If those belong to a Cub Scout kid from the Mormon church through that relationship through Howard Hughes, this is getting
weirder.
Can you do that again? And now we can clearly see spikes in the microwave data. Looks like we're going to have some really good, interesting data. And I'm super excited in the next 48 hours for the live stream logins to come in. Where did you get this rock, sir? The weird alien metamaterial rock. You know which one I'm talking about.